Hello and welcome to another edition of the Reality Vomit Podcast, an extension of the Vomit series of podcast. I'm your host, Mac Taylor, and we're here today. Guys, we are going to finish talking about The Amazing Race Season 1, episodes 11 through 13. We are going to crown a winner out of the 4 teams remaining. It has been a journey doing this. Like I said, I've enjoyed it much more than I thought I would. And I'm very excited to finish it, but at the same time, we're moving on to The Real World, which is a show I've also never really watched. I'm not really sure how I'm going to feel about it, and I'm am I going to really miss The Amazing Race when I start The Real World? We'll see. So without further ado, let's dive right in. So basically, heading into episode 11, there's such a big gap between the first 2 teams and the other 2 teams. So right now it's the Lawyers and Frank and Margarita fighting for first place, and the Guidos and the Frats fighting to not get eliminated. So basically we get 2 halves of all the episodes in the end. We got the half that deals with Frank and Margarita and the Lawyers, and the half that deals with the Frats and the Guidos. So it's actually there's not even a chance that they can get to second place. So they head to Beijing, to Jinshan Park, but you gotta get a flight to Beijing. So they go to Phuket, Thailand, back to Phuket to take the plane out. So Frank and Margarita, they are right behind the Lawyers. They are very, very close. And the Guidos are trying to keep high spirits because unlike Nancy and Emily, it looks grim as fuck. It looks way worse than it did for Nancy and Emily. But they're like, as long as right now our only goal, we got to get past. We got to beat the Frats, and then if we beat the Frats, then we'll start trying to get second and first. So they're in high spirits. They're doing it the right way, and I am kind of I love the Frats. I don't want to see either team go. But if I had to choose, you're typically going to root for the underdogs, and right now the Guidos are the underdogs. So the Lawyers missed the first flight to Phuket, so now they're stuck right with Frank and Margarita. If they could have caught that flight, they would have had put a gap between them and Frank and Margarita and cemented their first place status. But that did not happen, so they're stuck neck and neck. So Frank and Margarita, they also take time to get rid of extra weight in their bags. Books they're not reading anymore, papers they're not using, clothes they're not going to wear anymore. They're shedding the weight. And it's also a way for them to cleanse. This race, they have come a long way as a couple, as a separated couple that didn't only spoke about their daughter to now probably going to get back together and try to stay married. So the bottom 2 teams, they're clawing for that first spot because just as much as the Guidos don't want to go home, the Frats don't want to go home either. Both teams want more than anything to stay in this race, and that's what you want to see this late in the game. And Kevin, I didn't really talk about it as much in the last episode, but he is fantastic at handling booking these flights and stuff. He's a great communicator, not necessarily to Drew, but getting flight. He's very good at that stuff, and he's really shining, getting stuff taken care of. And so basically the 2 teams in ahead, like I said, the other 2 teams have not left yet. They're just now booking their flights to Thailand. Everybody else is, doing their shit in Beijing. So you either have to play ping pong against and score 5 points on a ping pong champion, or take a bus, motorcycle cab, and a bicycle cab to the place you got to go. And both teams, the Lawyers and Frank and Margarita, take ping pong. And Frank he does a very good job because the ping pong champion is not an adult, it's a child, but still pretty good at ping pong. Chinese are known for being good ping pong players. They have really good, strong ping pong teams and shit like that. I think the world champions of ping pong are Chinese. I don't know. I think Yao Man from Survivor was a ping pong guy. But Frank does fairly well, scores some points. The lawyers had to get lucky because they were getting smoked. But the only times that they scored points were when the kid accidentally hit the net or like accidentally missed it. Like it wasn't like them beating this kid, but this kid just beating himself. But either way, both teams do okay. They get through. Then from there, you must go to an Asian market where all the shit you need is in Chinese. We have to find someone to translate it, not only to you, but then to tell the vendors what you need. So they have to find someone to help you get all the stuff. And then once you get all of this stuff, which is 5 beetles, a squid, and 2 chicken feet, you then got to take it to a street vendor to cook it for you, and then you got to eat it. So Frank and Margarita are ahead. And Margarita, before she knows what the roadblock is, was like, I'm going to do it. I want to do it. And then finds out it's eating. And Frank's like, you feel real stupid now, don't you? Demanding that we had to do it. Nevertheless, both Frank and Margarita and the lawyers, they're eating at the same time. Frank is like glaring at Margarita while she's eating. And Brennan's like, whatever you do, don't do that to me. And they get through it fairly quickly. Margarita has a little bit of trouble, but nevertheless, both teams get done fairly quickly. And Frank and Margarita finish number 1, lawyers number 2, because Frank and Margarita talk about needing college tuition for their daughter. It's a good motivator. So they've already finished this leg, as the other teams are just now starting it. So now it's the face-off for third, and everyone talks about the other teams. The Frats and the Guidos are polar opposites in personality, which is completely true. But they're both extremely determined to win this race. That's the thing they have in common. They'll do anything. So the Frats, they get a slightly fast cab driver, so they're able to pull a little bit ahead of the Guidos. And both teams decide to go for the transportation over the ping pong thing. And I was like, whoever picked the ping pong could have actually probably gained some time. It doesn't take as long as you think, because they hear ping pong champion and score 5 points, and I thought, well, there's no way we're going to be able to do that. But these people aren't perfect. 5 points isn't a lot. It probably was easier to go that instead of the transportation race, but they both choose transportation, so at least not one team's going to be ahead. The Frats always have those one-liners that they get in there, where Drew's like, I don't even know what the bus looks like, and he's like, oh, well, when you learn to pay attention, you got to read the damn clue. And both teams have trouble translating with certain drivers. Kevin gets in the motorcycle sidecar, and him and Drew are laughing. Drew's like, you look like such an idiot with your helmet. And he's like, I'm Fat Man. And he's like, they're telling the driver, like, oh, wouldn't you like this fat guy in the sidecar not to be here? And he's like, no, I think the weight's coming from behind him. So it's funny stuff. They are amazing television. I would have casted these guys in a heartbeat. And it's neck and neck when it comes to the bike race. They're literally like, the Frats are slightly ahead of the Guidos, but like it's close. But then once they get there, they have to wait until the morning for the market to open. So they're both, still just neck and neck. And so they both get translators for the morning. And actually, I thought that the Frats still hated the Guidos because of the airport incident, but they said there's no animosity. It's just business. We just got to beat them because this is the race. And I think after India, everybody really truced each other because, they all were like, well, at least we all speak English and can hang out together. So it's neck and neck as they go through and get all the ingredients. Like, they're literally, like, right next to each other, like, the whole time. And they go to the eating, and Kevin's like, just pretend it's spaghetti or something. Or he's eating the chicken feet, and he's like, hey, it's Huda's eating the chicken. You're getting through it. He's like, give me that damn fork. You don't need that fork. So funny. So good. And the Frats are slightly ahead of the Guidos, but they get a little trouble in translating with their taxi about what the South Gate is, whereas Joe is able to look up how to say Southgate in Chinese, and actually they get dropped off at the Southgate, while the frats get out of their cab at the front and walk around. And due to that time spent walking around, the Guidos come in third. They pulled ahead. The frats are now eliminated. The Guidos did a very hard to do thing, which is go from the very back to pull out to the front. And the frats, guys, like I said, they were beautiful television. Absolutely enjoyed every time they were on my screen, and it was hard to see them go because you could see it in their eyes. They wanted this bad. They wanted to finish this race, and they were so close, you know. And they always say it in the challenge where it's like, well, if you go home right before the final, it's the same as going home first, except it hurts a lot more. And it does, because you've come all this way. They've traveled all over the world, done all these tasks together, and they were that close to being able to compete in the final, and they're not going to. And it's tough. But the Guidos are now a full day behind Franco Margarita and the Lawyers. And that, spoiler alert, is going to be a detriment to them. Like they are a whole 24 hours behind everybody. So in the next episode, Frank and Margarita, they're arguing over transportation. And this is the first time since the first episode that they've really had a falling out a little bit. So once the next legs start, they have to find a kite and get a clue. But they have to wait till morning. And the Lawyers talk about, we came into this race just wanting to finish. But now that we're here, we want to win. Because that's typically how that goes. If you go into something and just want to do, I would be okay with fourth place. But then once you get to the final four, you're like, well, I want third place. And then you get to third, and you're like, well, I want to win. You always want to try to do one better than you think. Frank and Margarita, they ask to go in early and actually do get 5 minutes on the Lawyers. It always helps to ask, Be like, hey, is it cool if we just go in here anyway? So they must go from here to the Great Wall and the lower level. And Frank and Margarita, Frank insists on going one way, and Margarita insists on going another way. And they end up going away. That is not the right way. And they have to hop a series of fences that looks super sketchy. Them just hopping all these fences. And the whole time they're like, I knew we shouldn't have gone here. And he's like, just get over the fence. And she's like, I don't know what your problem is. Like they're really having a tiff. But also, couples have arguments. And the fact that they were able to go from episode 1 to the finale, and they've only had two fights, they're doing a lot better than like Lenny and Karen. But they're still a little tense, especially once they finish the wall and or once they're just like climbing the wall. Like Margarita's like, I don't know why he has an attitude. Like he just needs to stop. And the Lawyers, they pull ahead because they don't have to hop fences and all that business. They just walk straight through. But when they get in the cab, their cabbie is super slow, and they ask him like 7 times, like, can you just speed up? We're in a race. We'll pay you extra. And he doesn't. He refuses. And then when he gets there, he tries to overcharge them, and they get pissed. And at one point, Rob pays him, but he's like, get out of my sight. Take the money and leave my sight. And, these were the guys giving out American flags at the start of the race, but, like, they're so... they're jet lagged. They're pissed. Like they're especially when they're like, hey, we're in a race. We're competing here. We need you to go. And he's like, blah, blah, blah. Let me just, listen to the radio, hang out. Be like, no, fuck you, dude. Like, drive. This is your job. Drive. And there's a couple times that the Lawyers try to be sneaky at the airport and, like, don't tell them our flight numbers out loud. But both times, Frank and Margarita book a flight anyway. And it's the same flight as the Lawyers. They have zero problem. So the episode tries to highlight this, but it literally amounts to nothing both times. So I'm mentioning it because it's there, but it means zero. So the Guidos are just now leaving Beijing, as everybody else is already on a flight to Alaska. And so the Guidos had to wait till the next morning to go to the wall. So the leaders land and go to a bed and breakfast in Alaska where they have to wait till morning to do their next task. But they're a whole leg ahead of the Guidos. It's ridiculous. Like, the season I just watched, 32, every team in the final starts at the same time. And that's how it should have went. It should have went, all right, guys. Bill and Joe, you guys managed to make it into the final, so everyone's leaving at the same time tomorrow morning. That's how it should have went. Placements don't matter anymore. There was only first. But to start the Guidos 24 hours behind the other, like, what chance do they have to win? They don't. And the fact that they made it to the final should have meant something. And I'm a little miffed that they just had zero chance to win this thing. Like, I don't even think they would have won anyway. The team that won deserved to win, but it should have been, all right, if you make the final, everyone starts, at the same time. It's a race. So the leading teams, they start out in the morning. You have to, like, get tossed up in a blanket and basically look for, like, 30 yards away. There's your clue. So it's really just like you go up and you're like, oh yeah, it's right over there. Like, I thought when they were throwing them up, it would be like out there, but it's really like you jump up and you're like, oh hey, there it is. Like, it's very, it's like that thing I talked about in my other podcast about something being slightly off camera, and like you go up and you're like, oh hey, there it is, and you pan over and boom, there it is. So both teams do that very, very quickly, and they must go ice climbing. But to find the ice climbing area, the road where, like, they had to get local directions, but the road where you turn in has a closed no trespassing sign, and they're like, yeah, just ignore that. And they drive over but because of the mix-up, the lawyers pull ahead of Frank and Margarita, but very slightly. Like, they're both doing the ice climbing at the same time. It's just that because they were, like, I don't know, like a minute and a half to 2 minutes ahead, that Rob and Brennan are just like a couple of footholds above Frank during the climbing. But both, beast it. They do a great job. Ice climbing ain't easy. They do a good job. And from there, they must ride a snowmobile to the next pit stop. And the Guidos are just hitting Alaska as everyone else is preparing to do this next part of the leg at this pit stop. So it's ridiculous, guys. Like, the Guidos are that far behind. And that brings us into the 13th and final episode. And the lawyers are like, man, last time. Like, we only have to do this one more time. But Joe, he's talking about, Clinton he compares them to the Clintons, where he's like, hey, they had to turn the presidency around 4 times. He called himself the comeback kid. We're comeback kids too. We can get it. And I really did respect them for, they were good sports. The airport incident was a bit much, but they for the most part, were good sports, and they never gave up. And you really got to commend them for it. So the leading teams have to hike from the lodge to this next point in the race in the dark. It's around like 5 in the morning. And they camp out in the cold. And the lawyers, and I had actually forgotten this. The lawyers had mentioned, or Frank and Joe had mentioned in the second episode, the first or second episode, I can't really remember. No, it was the second or third, because this was during the Alliance, where they're like, we can't team up with Rob and Brennan. They've never left. They mentioned they've never left the United States, and what are people that have never left the United States going to do in a race around the world? And I forgot that was mentioned. Like, that was so long ago. And I'm like, for 2 people that have never left the United States, did not know any other languages and all that, they've done tremendous in this race. They really have. And as much as I give them shit for being boring or very vanilla ice cream or at times hypocritical, they've done a hell of a job. They've earned their spot. Everyone here has earned their spot. Frank and Margarita deserve to be here. The Guidos deserve to be here. And it's funny to me too that the 3 teams that made the Alliance, in the second episode are the 3 teams that are going to finish this race. That alliance didn't make it out of episode 4, but it's ironic that no matter what, like, even though those teams finished together, I thought it was kind of a little fun fact. It wasn't a good alliance, but the teams were good within it. So the Guidos are doing the jump and the climb while everyone else is so much further ahead. They do dog sleds. And during the dog sled race, the lawyers pass because Frank is heavier and the dogs are having trouble. And then they must do a polar plunge from there. And Brennan and Frank do the plunging. And from there, they must head to New York City. And this is a key part of the race because Frank and Margarita are from New York City. They're actually going to Queens, which is like 10 blocks away from where their daughter is. And so Frank is cocky as fuck heading into this leg. He's like, New York's my stomping grounds. That's my city. I'm going to, if they're following us, I'm going to take them down side streets. They're going to be lost. We're going to dominate them. And in Frank's mind, they've already won. And you never underestimate your competition. And Brennan pays a lady $300 to use her cell phone so he can book flights book things in a cab. And it's like, listen, call me in 2 days. I'll mail it back to you. I promise. And what a phone call that would end up being later about this experience. I'm like, wow, who'd have thought to pay someone for their cell phone? Like, that's crazy. And the lawyers do also consider reserving seats on the flight to keep Frank and Margarita off of it, but they're like, it's too dirty. And I'm like, hey, do what you gotta do. I wouldn't be mad at you for doing it. The Guidos, like I said, are still a whole leg behind. They have no hope of winning. They're still hopeful, but it's not going to happen, guys. You're a whole day behind everybody else. So both teams are on the same flight again, so it's going to be a literal foot race when they get to New York City. And Frank does the stereotypical thing where, like, when a macho man wants to make someone the enemy, like, I never vibed with him anyway. I never liked him anyway. So, whatever. I'm just going to screw him over. I would beat him. Whatever. I never vibed with him. But, like, that's... they were never close, but, like, they were fine with the lawyers. It's just that Frank wants to justify whatever he's going to try to do in the future. Like, it's a cop-out phrase. So it's a cab race in New York. Frank's taking alternative routes because he knows the city. But the lawyers pull ahead during the traffic. And they end up getting on the train ahead of Frank and Margarita. And both teams think they're on the first train. But Frank and Margarita, they're like, we don't even see the lawyers. We must be way ahead of them. But really, they are just one train behind them. And Frank and Margarita, they're like, man, we're in our town. We're going to win with our daughter. Like, they've already won in their minds. However, the lawyers get off the train and sprint down where their former competition are now sitting waiting for them. And Phil is there. And they sprint to the end, and they've won the amazing race. The lawyers are our winners here. And Frank and Margarita are stunned when they see that the lawyers are there and that they have not won. And the Guidos are actually stopped in Alaska and told that the race is over and that they are in third place, which is a tough deal for the Guidos. They should have at least just let them finish the race. But my thoughts on the lawyers, they deserved it, man. Especially there at the end. They've had a lot of bad luck, particularly with cabs. But they stayed. They fell to the back of the pack at one point and then immediately went back up and have pretty much stayed within the top 4 teams the entirety of the race. And they deserved it, man. They fought tooth and nail. While they weren't the most interesting television, they were good at the game, and I couldn't really fault them for it, especially for guys that had never left the U.S. Did a hell of a job. Frank and Margarita, even they talk about it here, they didn't win the $1 million. But they came on the show to try to see if their relationship could work, to see if they could work things out, and they did. So while they didn't end up with the money, they ended up together, and that's ultimately what they came on here to do. They never expected to be as good as they were. They were fantastic players, And the Guidos, they literally came from the back, from a dead end situation, and battled their way to the final. And at the very least, pat them on the back. They did a hell of it. Every team here deserved it, but the lawyers are the winners. And that ends our coverage of The Amazing Race Season 1. It was a journey, guys. I had a blasty blast with it. I'm actually excited for Season 2, but we got a few seasons of reality TV before we're going to hit that. So stay tuned next time when we talk about the first few episodes of The Real World, where people stop being nice and start being real. I'm not really sure how I'm going to take that show, but, I like the challenge, so at least it's going to give me character development for the challenge. So until next time, guys, we got plenty of podcasts coming in 2021. Make sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification, all that business. Stay safe, and most importantly, guys, stay nerdy. I'm out.